We were married for 32 years with no kids. My dying husband left all 6 homes to his mistress. I simply smiled and said, "There's something I never told you." He passed away seconds later. Eric's sudden emergency heart landing last week landed him in ICU on full-time monitoring, and after 32 years of childless marriage, I knew every hidden lie he'd buried was finally about to surface. Listen y'all, I'm Dana, and I've spent my entire adult life building stability while my husband coasted off my hard work. We married young, straight out of community college, no family money backing us, no safety net to fall back on. The only difference between us from day one was simple. I planned for the future, and he lived strictly for temporary pleasure and instant gratification. Before I ever walked down the aisle, my parents set up an ironclad premarital trust in my name only. It was a small but smart inheritance from my maternal grandparents, designed to protect me in case marriage didn't pan out. Back then, I thought it was overly cautious. I believed we'd build our life together, side by side, equally invested in every asset we gained. I had no idea I'd end up funding our entire real estate portfolio alone for 3 decades. Through my late 20s, 30s, and 40s, I climbed the corporate ladder in commercial real estate asset management. I worked overtime weekends, took on high-pressure client accounts, and steadily grew the value of my trust fund through careful market investments and rental property purchases. Every single house we owned, all 6 residential properties scattered across 3 neighboring suburbs, came straight from my trust disbursements and my personal work bonuses. Let me make this crystal clear. Eric never contributed a single cent to any down payment, monthly mortgage, property tax bill, or emergency home repair. He worked basic retail management jobs his whole career, barely covering his own personal spending, car payments, and occasional travel. His paychecks never once touched our real estate expenses. Not one receipt, not one bank transfer, not one recorded contribution in 32 years. Here's the thing no one understands about our marriage. We lived comfortably, but we never lived flashy. Our friends and distant family always assumed our 6 rental homes and primary residence were joint marital assets. Even Eric believed that lie. He watched me handle every financial document, every closing disclosure, every monthly auto-pay setup, and never once bothered to ask how the money actually flowed. He just assumed half of everything was legally his. I found out about Angela 10 years ago, purely by accident. I was sorting old bank statements for tax filing season, going through years of organized financial records like I did every spring, when I noticed consistent weekly cash withdrawals and unexplained Venmo transfers to an unknown name. Small amounts at first, then larger holiday bonuses, random jewelry store charges, weekend hotel stays he'd claimed were work retreats. I didn't confront him that day. I didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't blow up his phone demanding answers. After 20 years of building our home and our reputation, I knew an emotional fight would only leave me vulnerable. If I filed for divorce in the heat of anger, state marital property laws could muddy the lines of my trust assets. I could lose portions of properties I'd built entirely on my own. So I did the opposite. I stayed calm. I doubled down on my documentation habits. I saved every single bank record, every trust fund disbursement statement, every closing document, every tax filing, and every receipt proving sole financial responsibility. I created a locked digital folder and a physical file cabinet exclusively for my property proof, updated monthly without fail. I also started quietly observing his patterns. He'd leave late at night claiming friend emergencies, take random weekday afternoons off, hide his phone screen whenever I walked in the room. He grew increasingly distant, less affectionate, more irritable with small household requests. He started resenting my structured financial habits, mocking me for being too rigid, too obsessed with paperwork, too focused on growing our assets. It took me 6 months of quiet observation to confirm Angela was a long-term coworker from his retail corporate office. Their affair wasn't a one-time mistake or a drunken fling. It was a decade-long emotional and physical relationship he'd maintained right under my roof, all while living in homes I paid for entirely. What hurt most wasn't just the cheating. It was the entitlement. Eric lived in my properties, enjoyed the passive rental income one generated, benefited from the stable credit and property equity I built, and still chose to invest his extra time, money, and affection into another woman. He never thanked me for our comfortable life. He just felt like he was owed half of everything I'd earned. As the years passed, his health started declining fast. He developed chronic hypertension, severe coronary artery disease, and constant heart arrhythmia. His doctor warned him repeatedly about stress, overexertion, and emotional spikes. I watched his condition worsen season by season, knowing his days were numbered. Still, I kept all my proof organized, waiting patiently for the day he'd reveal his true final intentions. I never once hinted at my knowledge of the affair. I never mentioned the trust fund specifics. I never corrected his casual comments about our houses or our shared investments. I let him live in his delusion that our 32-year marriage gave him legal rights to my sole assets. 2 weeks ago, his condition crashed. He suffered a massive cardiac arrest at home, and paramedics rushed him to the regional hospital. He coded twice in the ER before stabilizing in the ICU. His attending doctor, Patrick, told me straight that his heart was permanently damaged. Any severe emotional shock, any sudden spike in adrenaline, could end his life instantly. Instead of being humbled by his near-death experience, Eric grew bitter and defiant. Confined to his hospital bed, unable to work, unable to travel, unable to maintain his secret meetings, he grew obsessed with securing a future for Angela. He started muttering about final arrangements, about leaving something behind for the woman he'd loved for a decade. 3 days ago, he demanded an official bedside will reading. He refused to wait for hospital discharge, refused to finalize documents privately with his lawyer. He insisted on a formal witness session, specifically requesting my presence, along with my best friend Sydney and my estate attorney Chase. He even personally called Angela and told her to be there for the big reveal. I knew exactly what he was planning. After 32 years of me building every piece of our wealth, after a decade of cheating and lying, he was moments away from gifting my entire life's work to his mistress. I packed my locked file folder of certified legal documents, kept my composure completely neutral, and prepared to watch his delusional world crumble. The hospital room was quiet and sterile the morning before the reading. Beeping monitors tracked his fragile vitals, for lines ran into his arms, and his skin looked pale and frail. He looked every bit the dying man. Yet behind his tired eyes, there was a sharp, smug confidence. He truly believed he had full authority to rewrite my legacy however he pleased. I sat in the visitor chair beside his bed, calm and steady on the surface, while every unspoken betrayal of the past decade weighed quietly in my chest. After years of waiting, the final confrontation I'd prepared for was finally about to begin. After 32 years of childless marriage, I single-handedly built 6 properties and funded every expense with my own premarital trust. Meanwhile, my dying husband hid a decade-long affair and plotted to gift all my hard-earned homes to his mistress. Watch how I stayed calm, exposed the full legal truth, and overturned his greedy final plan. Would you have stayed quiet and waited for the perfect moment? Drop your opinion below, share this story, and subscribe for more real marriage justice and self-protection stories. It didn't take long for the small hospital room to fill up with tension and unspoken agendas. The morning light filtered through the narrow ICU windows, soft and muted, but the energy in that space was anything but calm. Every person who walked through that door had a role to play in the final breakdown of my 32-year marriage. Listen y'all, I'd spent 10 years imagining this moment. Not in a vengeful, screaming way, but in a quiet, prepared way. I'd watched Eric lie, cheat, and leech off my work for a decade, all while growing bolder in his sense of entitlement. He truly thought he'd gotten away with everything, and today was his chance to reward his mistress at my expense. My best friend Sydney arrived first. She's been in my life since high school, watched me build my career from the ground up, sat with me through every late-night work shift, every real estate closing, every stressful tax season. She's the only person who knew the full truth of our finances. She saw every dollar I poured into our properties and every dollar Eric refused to contribute. She sat beside me in the visitor chair, squeezed my hand once, and didn't say a word. She knew I didn't need comfort. I needed witnesses. My estate attorney Chase showed up next, carrying a slim professional briefcase. He's handled my trust amendments, property registrations, and asset protection planning for years. He knew exactly why Eric had demanded this will reading. He knew what Eric was about to try and steal. He nodded at me silently, took a standing position near the back wall, and waited for the room to settle. The last person to walk in was Angela. She didn't step in with shame or hesitation. She walked into that hospital room like she owned the place, dressed polished and confident, carrying a small designer bag, her head held high. She didn't glance at me, didn't acknowledge Sydney or Chase. Her eyes locked straight on Eric's hospital bed, soft and sympathetic, playing the role of the devoted secret partner perfectly. It was disgusting to watch. She'd spent a decade benefiting from my husband's affection, my husband's cash gifts, and my hard-earned lifestyle. She'd enjoyed dinners, vacations, and luxury items funded entirely by my real estate income. Yet she stood there acting like she was the one who'd stayed loyal and supportive through his declining health. Eric's entire demeanor shifted the second she walked in. His pale face perked up, his tired eyes lit up, and he lifted a shaky hand to gesture her closer. He didn't spare me a single glance. After 32 years of marriage, I was just background noise in his final love story. Dr. Patrick stayed in the room as required hospital protocol. He monitored Eric's heart rate on the screen, adjusted his foredrip quietly, and kept a close eye on his vitals. He'd already warned us all that Eric's cardiovascular system was extremely fragile. Any sudden emotional surge could trigger fatal arrhythmia. Eric didn't care. He was too focused on his final power play. Once everyone was assembled, Eric cleared his throat weakly and took full control of the room. He spoke in a slow, raspy voice, making sure every single person heard every word. He said he'd spent weeks drafting his final will, revising it carefully to reflect what he called fair and deserved distribution. He openly admitted he'd kept a long-term relationship with Angela, said she'd loved him faithfully through his worst health struggles, and claimed I'd grown cold, distant, and obsessed only with money and property over the years. He painted me as the cruel, ungrateful wife and her as the compassionate partner who'd truly cared for him. I sat there and listened without a single reaction. I didn't roll my eyes, didn't shake my head, didn't interrupt. I'd expected this narrative. Cheating spouses always rewrite history to justify their betrayal. They minimize decades of loyalty and hard work to make their selfish choices feel righteous. Then Eric asked Chase to read the official will aloud. Chase hesitated for a split second, glanced at me, and I gave him a tiny, almost unnoticeable nod. I was ready to hear every word. Chase began reading the document in a steady, professional tone. The terms were clear, blunt, and unbelievably bold. Eric formally bequeathed his entire estate, including all 6 residential properties, all rental equity, all residual savings, and all property-related assets directly to Angela. He named her the sole and exclusive beneficiary of every single home I'd ever purchased. He left me absolutely nothing. No spousal provision, no residual inheritance, no personal property allowance. After 32 years of marriage, he erased me entirely from his final legacy and handed my life's work to the woman he cheated with for a decade. The second the final sentence of the will left Chase's mouth, Angela's entire demeanor changed. The soft, sympathetic act vanished instantly. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. She stood a little taller, tilted her chin up, and glanced directly at me for the first time since walking in the room. Her eyes were filled with pure arrogance and victory. She thought she'd won. She thought she was about to walk away with 6 fully paid-off homes, years of rental equity, and a stable real estate portfolio worth well over $1 million. She thought my 32 years of sacrifice and discipline were now hers to claim. Sydney tightened her grip on my hand, her expression tight with suppressed anger. She knew how much those properties meant to me. She knew every late night, every risky investment call, every careful budget choice that built that portfolio. It was all mine, and we both watched a dying man try to give it all away to a stranger. The room fell thick with silence. The only sounds were the steady beep of the heart monitor, the quiet hum of hospital equipment, and Eric's shallow breathing. Everyone waited for my reaction. They expected tears, screaming, outrage, or devastation. They expected the betrayed wife to fall apart in front of them. Eric looked over at me finally, his eyes sharp and challenging. He wanted to see me break. He wanted to leave this world knowing he'd hurt me one last time, that he'd stripped me of everything I'd built to reward his mistress. He died feeling powerful, and he wanted to watch me feel powerless. But I didn't break down. I didn't frown, didn't cry, didn't argue. I simply smiled, calm and unrushed, and shifted forward slightly in my chair. I locked eyes with my dying husband, and I could see his confidence waver for just a split second. He hadn't prepared for me to be unfazed. In that quiet hospital room, surrounded by witnesses, legal counsel, his triumphant mistress, and his attending doctor, I prepared to speak the truth that would unravel every last one of his delusions. That room was holding its breath, waiting for me to spiral. Angela's smug smile was locked in place, convinced she'd just secured a lifelong fortune off my husband's final wish. Eric's gaze bore into me, sharp and bitter, ready to feed on my pain. Even Sydney and Chase were quiet, letting me take the lead in a moment no one could prepare for me. Listen y'all, I'd waited 10 years for this exact second. 10 years of quietly logging receipts, saving trust disclosures, and documenting every single financial move Eric never bothered to understand. I didn't stay silent out of weakness. I stayed silent because I wanted him to dig his own hole all the way to the bottom before I handed him the final truth. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady and soft, no yelling, no bitterness, just pure calm. I told Eric I wasn't upset, and I wasn't shocked. I said I'd known about Angela for a decade, watched him drain small sums of cash, lie about his whereabouts, and treat my hard-earned assets like they were his free personal playground. I'd let him believe whatever he wanted, because his delusions never hurt me legally, until he tried to hand my life's work to someone else. Eric's face faltered instantly. He'd spent years lying so smoothly he'd started believing his own fake truth. He assumed I was oblivious, clueless, too focused on work to notice his long-term affair. The realization that I'd known everything, this entire time, hit him harder than any argument ever could. He tried to cut me off, his voice cracking with weak frustration from his hospital bed. He mumbled excuses, tried to deflect, said I was bitter and jealous, that I was only lashing out because I'd never loved him the way Angela did. But I held up one hand, quiet and firm, and stopped his rambling cold. I told him there was one critical secret I'd kept through our entire 32-year marriage, something he'd never once taken the time to verify or research. Every single one of those 6 houses he'd just willed away did not belong to our marriage. They never belonged to him, not even a fraction of equity, not a single legal claim. I watched his eyes go wide, confusion mixing with arrogance as he tried to process my words. He opened his mouth to argue, spouting off what he thought was legal fact. He said we'd acquired those homes during our marriage, that everything purchased while married is joint marital property by default in our state. He truly believed he had every right to gift those homes to whoever he chose. That's when Chase stepped forward, finally breaking his silence. He unzipped his briefcase and spread an organized stack of certified legal documents across the small bedside tray table. The papers were official, court-filed, fully notarized, every single one dated and recorded long before we ever exchanged marriage vows. Chase spoke in a clear, authoritative tone that left zero room for debate. He explained my grandparents' premarital trust was fully established and funded 5 years before I met Eric. All 6 property down payments came directly from trust principal disbursements. Every monthly mortgage autodraft, every annual property tax payment, every repair invoice was exclusively withdrawn from my separate trust account, never any joint marital funds. He clarified state marital law plainly for everyone in the room. Properties purchased entirely with verified premarital trust assets, with zero spousal contribution of any kind, remain the sole and separate property of the trust holder. Eric had never contributed labor, money, or credit to a single transaction. Legally, he had no ownership stake, no equitable claim, and absolutely no authority to write those homes into his will. The air in the room shifted completely. Angela's smug smile froze on her face, then slowly crumbled away. She stepped back half a step, her confident posture deflating instantly. The $1 million future she'd been celebrating vanished in seconds, replaced by pure shock and embarrassment. She'd spent years clinging to a married man, waiting for his inheritance, only to find out there was nothing for her to inherit. Eric's face drained of every last drop of color. His lips turned pale, his jaw went slack, and his breathing instantly turned rapid and shallow. He stared at the stack of documents like they were burning him, like the printed legal words were physically attacking him. For 32 years, he'd lived under the delusion that he co-owned my empire. He'd felt entitled to my success, resented my financial discipline, and cheated on me while leeching off my work. Now he realized he'd been nothing more than a resident in homes I owned outright. A guest with zero rights, zero equity, zero legacy to give away. Every judgment he'd cast on my career, every complaint about my strict budgeting, every arrogant assumption of joint ownership collapsed in a single moment. His heart monitor started beeping faster, the steady rhythm spiking into an erratic pattern. Dr. Patrick's head snapped toward the screen immediately. He rushed to the bedside, checking Eric's pulse and oxygen levels, his tone urgent and sharp. He warned Eric to calm down, to regulate his breathing, that his heart was struggling to compensate for the sudden emotional shock. But Eric couldn't calm down. Shock, rage, humiliation, and crushing regret crashed over him all at once. He betrayed his loyal wife for a decade, wasted his final days plotting to steal her assets, and embarrassed himself in front of every witness in the room. He'd died a fool, and he could feel his body shutting down from the trauma of that truth. He tried to speak, his throat tight and gasping, but no coherent words came out. Only weak, ragged breaths and quiet gurgles. His fingers scrambled weakly at the sheets, his eyes locked on me with a mix of hatred and desperate pleading he'd never shown me in 32 years. Angela stood frozen in place, her earlier pride completely shattered. She didn't move to comfort him, didn't say a word, didn't dare meet anyone's eyes. She knew she'd been exposed as a greedy opportunist with no legitimate claim, no legal standing, no place in this room anymore. Sydney leaned closer to me, her voice barely a whisper, asking if I wanted to step out of the room. I shook my head gently. I'd waited too long to walk away from the final chapter of this marriage. I needed to see every last lie fall apart completely. The monitor's beeps grew faster and more erratic, turning into a sharp, urgent alarm tone. Dr. Patrick grabbed emergency crash cart equipment, moving fast to stabilize Eric's failing vitals, but it was already too late. The damage was instantaneous and irreversible. After years of chronic heart failure, his overstressed cardiovascular system finally gave out entirely under the weight of his crushing shock. In that quiet hospital room, seconds after the truth came out, Eric's body stopped fighting. His chest stilled, his eyes went blank, and the monitor flatlined completely. The second the monitor flatlined, the entire room fell into a bone-chilling silence. The steady beeping that had lingered for weeks, the sound that had become the background of our final days together, vanished completely. In its place was nothing but heavy, hollow stillness, broken only by the faint hum of distant hospital equipment outside the room. Listen y'all, I didn't cry. I didn't gasp or flinch or feel an ounce of grief. After 32 years of quiet betrayal, 10 years of knowing every lie he'd hidden, and watching him spend his final hours trying to ruin my life's work for a woman who didn't care about him, all I felt was cold, unshakable relief. The long, draining chapter of my toxic marriage was finally over for good. Dr. Patrick moved on pure professional autopilot. He immediately grabbed the defibrillator pads, checked Eric's pupils, and ran through the full emergency resuscitation protocol. He and the on-call nurse worked rapidly, pressing on his chest, administering emergency medication, and trying to jumpstart his stopped heart. But everyone in the room knew it was useless. The fatal cardiac shock had already done irreversible damage. After several minutes of frantic, fruitless effort, Dr. Patrick stepped back from the bed, lowered his hands, and shook his head slowly. He checked the time on his medical watch, then turned to all of us with a calm, solemn tone and officially pronounced Eric dead. Through all of this chaos, Angela never moved an inch. She stood rooted to the spot near the foot of the hospital bed, her face pale and ghostly white, her earlier smug confidence completely erased. All her big dreams of inheriting 6 houses, of living off my hard-earned wealth, of stepping into the role of Eric's official partner had shattered in an instant. She wasn't grieving. She was panicking, terrified of leaving this room with absolutely nothing to show for a decade of cheating and waiting. She finally found her voice after the official death pronouncement, and it came out shaky and defensive. She tried to backtrack every single one of her unspoken claims, stammering that she'd only cared about Eric's well-being, that she'd never cared about his money or his houses. She claimed she was just a loyal companion who'd loved him through his sickness, and that none of this was her fault. I turned to her slowly, my voice still calm and unrushed, no anger, no malice, just plain honesty. I told her loyalty isn't sneaking around with a married man for 10 years while his wife builds your lover's entire life from scratch. Loyalty isn't showing up to a dying man's bedside to collect an inheritance you did nothing to earn. I told her she'd spent a decade benefiting from my hard work, my properties, my stable finances, and she had zero right to play the innocent victim now. Sydney stepped forward beside me, solid and unwavering, backing up every word I said. She'd watched me sacrifice decades of my life, my energy, and my career to build security for a man who'd never appreciated me. She'd seen me work holidays, skip vacations, and stress over every property detail while Eric wasted his time and money on his secret affair. She made it clear Angela had no moral ground to stand on in that room. Chase shifted into full legal mode, cutting through Angela's flustered excuses with sharp, factual clarity. He told her directly that Eric's will was completely null and void regarding all real estate assets. Since Eric held zero legal ownership of any of the 6 homes, he had no testamentary rights to gift or distribute them. The entire clause granting her my properties was legally invalid, unenforceable, and would be immediately thrown out in probate court. He also warned her that any attempt to contest the estate, file false claims of spousal equity, or harass me for assets would result in an official civil harassment filing and a formal court restraining order. She had no legal standing, no witness credibility, and no valid argument to challenge my sole ownership. Angela's shoulders slumped in defeat. She glanced at Eric's lifeless body one last time, no trace of love or sorrow in her eyes, only bitter disappointment. She'd wasted 10 years of her life clinging to a married man, hoping to inherit a fortune that never actually existed. She'd humiliated herself in front of a lawyer, a doctor, my best friend, and me, with nowhere to turn and nothing to gain. Without another word, she grabbed her purse, turned on her heel, and rushed out of the hospital room. She didn't offer a single condolence, didn't apologize, didn't even spare a final look at the man she'd claimed to love. She left fast, desperate to escape the overwhelming shame of her failed scheme. Once she was gone, the room felt lighter, like a heavy toxic cloud had finally lifted. Dr. Patrick finished his official documentation of the time of death, pulled the monitors away from Eric's bed, and quietly exited the room to arrange the next steps for hospital protocol. That left only Sydney, Chase, and me in the quiet room, staring at the empty shell of the marriage I'd devoted 32 years to. Chase walked me through the immediate legal next steps, steady and reassuring. He explained that the probate process would be simple and straightforward. With the full stack of certified trust documents, premarital filings, and zero financial contributions from Eric on record, the court would issue a summary judgment affirming my sole ownership of all 6 properties. There would be no delays, no disputes, no loopholes for anyone to contest. He also confirmed that since all assets were locked in my individual premarital trust, they were completely protected from any of Eric's outstanding minor debts, medical bills, or final estate fees. I would not be financially responsible for any of his end-of-life expenses, a final layer of protection I'd built years prior. Sydney pulled me into a gentle hug, her voice soft and supportive. She told me I'd handled the impossible with more grace than anyone she'd ever known. She reminded me that I hadn't lost anything that day, I'd finally reclaimed every single piece of myself that I'd spent 32 years holding back for a man who never deserved me. I stood there for a long moment, looking out the hospital window at the quiet neighborhood outside. I thought about all the years I'd spent doubting myself, wondering if I was too strict with finances, too focused on work, too unyielding with my boundaries. I'd spent decades making sure our future was secure, while Eric spent decades plotting to take it all from me. I'd waited 10 years for justice, not revenge. I'd never wanted Eric dead, never wished for his fatal health decline. All I'd ever wanted was to protect the life I'd built and stop letting ungrateful people leech off my hard work. In the end, his own greed, entitlement, and betrayal were what destroyed him. As I prepared to leave the hospital and step back into my life as a single, independent woman with full ownership of my legacy, I knew one thing for certain: the hardest chapter of my life was over, and the best was finally beginning. Leaving the hospital that day felt surreal, like walking out of a 32-year fog I didn't even realize I'd been trapped in. The sky was bright and clear, the afternoon air warm against my face, and for the first time in decades, I didn't carry the quiet weight of waiting for the next lie, the next betrayal, or the next selfish demand from Eric. Listen y'all, people often assume long marriages end with crippling grief, even when they're toxic. But grief only sticks when there's real love, mutual effort, and shared respect to mourn. My marriage was just a one-sided contract I'd upheld alone for most of my adult life. I grieved none of it. I only felt free. In the days following Eric's passing, I focused entirely on wrapping up loose legal ends. Chase filed the probate petition immediately, attaching every certified trust document, property record, and payment verification I'd compiled over the years. The court review was swift and uncomplicated, just as he'd predicted. The judge reviewed the premarital trust filings, cross-checked decades of financial records, and confirmed beyond any legal doubt that Eric had never contributed a single dollar to any of our 6 residential properties. The official court ruling came through within a month, fully affirming my sole, exclusive ownership of every home. Eric's will was formally voided in its entirety regarding real estate assets, with the court issuing a clear written statement that he had no legal authority to dispose of property that never belonged to his marital estate. It was a clean, final judgment with zero room for appeal or further contest. Of course, Angela didn't go down without petty, desperate pushback. Even after Chase's firm hospital warning, she attempted to file a creditor's claim against Eric's estate, trying to argue she was entitled to compensatory damages for years of emotional support and companionship. She tried to frame her decade-long affair as a sacrificial, unpaid partnership worthy of financial compensation. Chase shut down her claim within 48 hours. He submitted witness statements, timelines of her documented financial gifts from Eric, and state case law precedent barring non-spousal romantic partners from estate compensation. The court dismissed her claim outright, penalizing her for frivolous filing and leaving her with court fees to cover on top of her empty inheritance. She sent multiple desperate texts and voicemails afterward, first begging for a financial settlement, then switching to passive-aggressive threats to tarnish my reputation locally. She claimed I was cruel, cold, and unforgiving, that I'd ruined her future out of spite. I never responded to a single message. I blocked her number, her social media profiles, and every possible way she could reach me, cutting her toxic energy out of my life permanently. What surprised me most was the quiet ripple of community gossip that followed. A handful of distant family acquaintances and old mutual friends took sides based on Eric's final lies. They whispered that I'd been a cold, unyielding wife who drove him to cheat, that I cared more about money and houses than my dying husband. They bought into the narrative Eric had crafted in his final months, ignoring 32 years of my loyalty and sacrifice. I never bothered correcting any of them. I've learned over a lifetime that people who thrive on gossip rarely care about the full truth. They only want a dramatic story to talk about. I knew my paperwork, my legal record, and my lived experience spoke for themselves, and I didn't owe anyone a public defense of my choices or my character. Sydney stood firmly beside me through every awkward conversation and quiet rumor. She sat with me through long evenings, reminding me that true peace never comes from proving yourself to strangers. It comes from protecting your own peace and honoring the work you've done to build your life. With the estate fully settled and all external conflict resolved, I turned my attention back to my properties and my own healing. I spent weekends walking through each of my 6 homes, checking maintenance updates, refreshing minor decor, and processing the quiet reality that every wall, every floor, every asset surrounding me was entirely mine. No loopholes, no shared claims, no leeching partner waiting to take credit for my work. I adjusted my investment strategy, streamlined my rental management systems, and finally started enjoying the passive income I'd spent decades building. For the first time ever, I traveled on my own schedule, treated myself to small luxuries I'd always put off, and lived without budgeting for someone else's careless spending or hidden affairs. I also took time to reflect on the 10 years I spent quietly gathering proof, waiting for the right moment instead of rushing into conflict. A lot of people would call that cold or calculated, but I call it self-preservation. As women, we're often taught to react with emotion, to fight in the moment, to prioritize harmony over protection. I chose to prioritize my future, my assets, and my dignity over temporary peace. Eric spent his entire life taking my stability for granted. He assumed my calm nature meant I was naive, that my quiet discipline meant I could be walked over, that my hard-earned wealth was community property he could freely give away. His terminal mistake was underestimating the quiet woman who built every single thing he ever enjoyed. People still ask me if I feel regret for how his final moments unfolded. I'm honest every single time. I regret that he wasted 32 years of our life, that he threw away a loyal marriage for empty infatuation, that he chose greed and betrayal over security and honesty. But I do not regret protecting what is mine. I do not regret speaking the truth that stripped him of his delusions. I do not regret saving my own future. Today, I live peacefully and unapologetically. I manage my properties independently, surround myself with genuine loved ones, and move through life with a quiet confidence I never had during my marriage. I no longer compromise my boundaries, downplay my success, or tolerate anyone who tries to take advantage of my kindness. This story isn't about revenge. It's about the quiet, powerful victory of every person who builds alone, endures betrayal silently, and chooses long-term protection over short-term emotional outbursts. No one gets to spend decades leeching off your hard work, disrespecting your loyalty, and stealing your peace, and then inherit the life you built with every ounce of your effort. If you're sitting in a relationship where you carry all the responsibility, build all the wealth, and tolerate all the betrayal, take this as your sign, document everything, protect your assets, and never let anyone mistake your calm for weakness. Your boundaries, your success, and your future are always worth defending. This 32-year marriage collapse proves one brutal truth: quiet, hardworking women are never weak for staying calm. I spent decades building wealth alone, endured long-term betrayal, and chose rational legal protection over impulsive conflict. In the end, my unwavering boundaries defeated my husband's entitlement and my rival's greed. Do you think I made the right choice by waiting patiently instead of fighting early? Share this story to empower every woman who's silently building alone. Leave your thoughts below, and subscribe for more raw, eye-opening true life stories.